Welcome to the Liberated Investor Advantage podcast with your host, Doug Alden. In this podcast, we help you deal with and understand the uncertainties of investing and financial planning. Join us for this journey as your host, Doug Alden, teaches you how to move forward, no matter what life or the markets throw your way.
Hello and welcome to the Liberated Investor Advantage with Doug Alden. Good morning, Doug. How are you?
Good morning, Eric. I'm really good. Had a great night's sleep and have been thinking about this podcast for several days. So I'm anxious to get going.
All right. And I know last time we did a lot about the onboarding process and just kind of discussed your first interactions with clients and how you kind of interview each other and talk to each other and see if it's a good fit. Right. And I know we're going to kind of revisit some of that and dive deeper into kind of the what I believe is a client profile interview guide, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. We said we wanted to bring that up. It's called the Total Client Profile Guide.
Yes.
And the discovery process of what we go through in order to establish a relationship with potential clients. But first, I wanted to clean up some stuff from the last podcast that I kind of left open, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's do it.
One of the things I said, there's 4 areas of people trying to get your money, and 1 is the government, and 2 is financial institutions, and 3 is little OU, and 4 is corporations. And in corporations, I include the financial media. And it's really kind of sad what's happening because you just never hear anything good. You just never do. It's always about what's bad or what's happening in the world. It's kind of like, how many times do we have to have someone tell us the end of the world as we know it need to arrive before we realize that it's not really the end of the world as we know it? That was a quote by Michael Lewis. And so products from corporations are produced to give the illusion of safety. F.A. Hayek was an author who wrote The Road to Serfdom. And in the first few lines of his book, he said people, communities, government, countries will give up their freedom for security. They get scared, and they want protection from what they're scared of, and so they give up a little freedom. Remember I talked about last time about how people give up control of their money. And so when market fluctuation happens, and volatility is a fact of life, I've got a great article on volatility if anybody wants it, that's going to happen. That's where the returns come from. But your accounts, the stock market goes down 2% or 2.5% in one day, and my gosh, you turn on the news and you think, all right, well, we better, build a boat because of the fear that is instilled through the news medias.
Yeah.
It's just pandering is all it is.
Well, they're selling something, right? I mean, they're selling something just like, the car manufacturers are selling you airbags. They're selling you all these safety features. You're going to go with a safer vehicle if you can afford it. No news outlet ever in my history of 45 plus years has ever said, hey, tonight at 10 o'clock, everything is great and kittens are still fluffy. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Nobody's going to tune in. Nobody's tuning into that because, I kind of knew that. Things are kind of good and kittens are fluffy. So,
yep. There was an old saying in the news people industry is that if it bleeds, it leads. And so that's what happens all the time. Let me give you a couple of examples.
Sure.
There was the 2 articles that I came across. One was about a gentleman who was an unbelievably good saver. And he was planning to leave his IRA to grandkids. But what he had done, he had faithfully saved. I mean, let me give you just some of his statistics. He has 2 cars, 14 years and 24 years old. He said they run fine. And he hasn't bought any new clothes in a long time. So he saved a lot of money. But in the process, he created 4 individual IRA accounts for himself that he wanted to leave to each of his grandkids. And then he paid a ton of money to convert those IRAs into Roth IRAs. In other words, he took the money from the IRA, paid the tax on it, and then put the balance into the Roths so that each would be worth more than $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going to give it to his grandkids. And that's called stretch IRAs or stretch Roth IRAs.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you inherit at the current law, you get to take out your required minimum distributions at your life expectancy. Well, a 72-year-old and a 14-year-old have a totally different life expectancy.
Just slightly, yes. I agree.
Yes. So the 14-year-old is going to have to take out much less each year.
Correct.
But guess what? There's a little thing going on in Congress that says, no. These weren't designed for that.
Mm-hmm.
These were designed for individual retirements. I got a story to ask you, a question to ask you. I said, you know who Willie Sutton was?
Boy, the name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was a bank robber.
Oh, well, no, I was way off then. I was thinking baseball player. Go ahead, bank robber.
No. Well, he might have been a baseball player too.
Just in his free time.
He kept robbing banks. And this was in the Bonnie and Clyde days.
All right.
The 20s, 1920s, and things like that. A little bit earlier than that. And finally, he kept getting caught. Well, last time he got caught, a reporter went up to him. He says, "Willie, why do you keep robbing banks?" And Willie says, "Because that's where the money is."
Yeah. Okay.
That's where the money is.
Yeah.
Now, I did a little research this morning before we got on the line, and I said, how much money is in retirement accounts, deferred comp and IRAs and 401ks and 403bs and stuff like that? Guess how much money is there right now?
Oh, I'm thinking it's got to be in the trillions.
Yeah, it's 9 with 12 zeros after it. That's $9 trillion. That's a big target.
That is a very large target.
So what I said was, okay, why do you want to put a target on your back? I believe in these retirement accounts. I have one. My clients have one, but that's not all they do.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in moderation. So what this new law is, it's called the Secure Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And what these new law plans on doing is you inherit an IRA, guess what? You've got to take it out in 10 years, which really puts a limit on how long these people can appreciate and take advantage of tax-deferred savings.
Yeah.
When the Roth IRA came out, and this is just an editorial on my part, and forgive me for being opinionated, but I don't trust the government. I've studied the history of the government and how it treats our money, and they never tell the truth. They just never tell the truth. Or situations change that force them to look for money.
Mm-hmm.
And right now the Roth IRA is still tax-free. You have to pay tax on the contributions before you put them in the Roth.
Yeah.
But it accumulates tax-free, and their withdrawals are tax-free. And I said, I just don't trust them. If I find somebody with a Roth, that's okay. But they always ask me, should I convert to Roth? And I said, I wouldn't hurry up and pay the taxes on something. That's kind of the time value of money. This gentleman that was referred to in the article paid over $1 million in taxes to do that, to get the IRA money into Roth IRA money. And so tax law changes are notorious for making what used to be okay. I remember, I think it was back in the 80s, that Congress passed a retroactive tax law change, which means that all the planning that was done up to that point was just erased.
Yeah, I don't even know how they even do that. I mean, well, it's the government, so I
they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Anyway, if I trust the government, that's a promise. If I do other things with my wealth and put it into contracts, that's a whole different story. A whole different story. Contracts must be honored. So far, in our country, promises can be broken. At $9 trillion in retirement accounts is big money.
Yeah.
The current crop of politicians is pointing at the rich people and paying a percent on their wealth every year, but inevitably the money comes from the middle class. And the middle class that's got all these money in the retirement accounts is one of the things of the people that are trying to take your money away from you. And you must guard against this. You must put up protections. It's too bad I couldn't reach this man that was in the article, because there was a way to get it all to his kids and then some, which kind of, the regular media, the regular financial institutions aren't going to teach them that. They're going to show him some other strategies that end up where he's more subject. He's very vulnerable to taxes, and so taxes are going to go up. I mean, we're $22 trillion in debt as a country, and so I think that's the time when you really need my process. You really need to go through the Liberated Investor Advantage to see all these things and to understand how they work and to check me out. St. Paul says in the Bible, he says, be a Berean. And Bereans were people who studied Scripture. So I want people to study what I'm saying and challenge me to prove me wrong. And if I'm right, then let's move forward to help you protect, build, enjoy your wealth, and leave a legacy.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. That's why we have the client profile guide. That's why I have the discovery process. That's why we put people through a pretty extensive interview to get into the door, and then make it pretty easy if they ever want to leave. So I'm just the opposite. Most people would make it easy to become a client and hard to leave, especially when you got to pay such huge surrender costs on your wealth in order to get it, and taxes. It's just the opposite for me.
Yeah. So let's dive into the total client profile interview guide just a little bit with the remaining time that we've got. This thing is packed with questions, and it's got a lot of different categories. Can you kind of walk us through some of the categories and maybe some of the sample questions?
Sure. Well, the first thing you got to find out is what is important to you about money. I think I talked about that last time. What keeps you up at night? Why do you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning? Or why do you get up and go to work? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
What is your value about money? And if I can really zero in on finding out what everyone is really trying to ultimately accomplish with their wealth, then we can really begin to make some progress.
Yeah, I mean, like your story, that gentleman wanted to leave a legacy to his grandchildren.
Yes.
Not everybody's going to have grandchildren, but maybe some people are philanthropic, or they're part of a church that they would love to bless, or
Sure.
Everybody has their own values and goals. So diving into that is obviously the first step and very important.
The value step is the first thing, and they have to know that I'm going to be creative. I'm going to be in relationship with these people, and I'm going to be supportive of them in order to help them reach the goals that we ultimately get to. And that's kind of the next category we get into. What are your personal goals? What are your professional goals? I ask a question, and this comes by benefit of the Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach, who I've spent a lot of money with over the years. And it's called the DOS conversation. It's a simple conversation. First thing I ask people, and I'll ask you rhetorically, Eric, let's suppose today's October 1st, 2019. Can you believe it?
Yeah, that's already
three quarters of this year is gone. And I had a friend of mine. Just a little sidebar here. I had a friend of mine who had a birthday party. He turned 70, and it was a pretty big party. He's been in the area a long time. He's been a CPA, elder of a church. Just a really, really good guy. And he had a couple hundred people come up. And so Gina and I were looking for birthday cards, and she found one. She says, the lead says, somebody said you're as old as Methuselah. And I said, no, you're not. Methuselah's dead. And then at the bottom of the card, I said, if you think the decade of your 60s went quickly, Steve, buckle up because the 70s are going to go even faster. It was his 70th birthday party, so it was kind of fun. But it just goes fast, and so you've got to what is really important to you to get it going and start accumulating and start building and start looking for transfers of wealth that you inadvertently make or don't make. You don't see, you make them, you just don't see them, and try to plug some of those holes. So that's the process. That's called the R factor question. So if we were on a podcast and it's October 1st, 2022, and you and I are looking back over the last 3 years, Eric, what would you want to have accomplished in those 3 years for you to be happy about your progress, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, that's a great question because hindsight's always 20/20. I mean, that's the saying, right? And I think of all the movies, whether it's Star Wars or I'm a nerd, so it's Star Wars or Star Trek, any of those ships that move really fast, when they take off, all the stars become like this blur of light, right? And that's kind of the effect that the movies have always used as they hit warp or whatever speed they're hitting.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I'm a Star Wars guy too. Star Trek, Star Wars.
Yeah, and so I feel like the older I get, that's kind of what's happening. Unless I have a clear vision in front of me, like we talk about goals and setting those goals and being able to see mile markers along the way, everything can just become a blur because it's just moving so fast.
Yeah, Gene and I wake up on Monday morning, and by the time we go to bed that night, it's Friday.
Yeah,
I mean, it just seems to go that quick.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really fast. So those are some of the things and goals we want to talk about. We want to talk about relationships. What kind of relationships do you have?
Yeah.
How important are your relationships with the people you work with, or your family, your community? What is it that you're trying to accomplish by having these types of relationships?
Mm-hmm.
We, of course, look at your assets. I have a model that I put on everybody. I can diagram Bill Gates if he'd let me, but it all goes on one page along with all your debt and your income. It's a pretty nice, concise report once we finally get there. That takes a lot of time because you got to pry. I mean, this is really funny because I say, okay, here's the information I need to get started. Let's say we finalize a deal and we move forward. I said, here's the information I need to get started. And by the way, I need these following documents. And it's somebody's wills and their car insurance and their homeowner's insurance and disability and health and any trust agreements they have, your savings accounts, credit unions, money market accounts, any annuities that you might own, any Roth IRAs, any tax deferred products like an IRA or a 401k, stuff like that. Any investment accounts that you may have, whether they're in stocks or bonds or whatever, any homes, your debt instruments, your mortgages, the list goes on. And so I ask them, now get all these documents, because when we get them in this room and I'm reviewing them with you, it's probably the first time they've all met each other.
Yeah.
Because people are scattered. They don't know where this is or that is or whatever. I used to be able to tell people I could find any document you want blindfolded in the dark by going to my model and figuring out what I need to look for with my hands. I can count and know what file that's going to be in. And ultimately they can too. So that's very important. Your assets, obviously, we got to know what you're trying to do with accumulations.
Yeah.
We like to know who your advisors are,
And this is the section. Yeah, this is the section that I love because you gave me these notes, or you gave me the actual interview guide, quite a few weeks back. And I've been looking over this, and there are very few advisors out there that take the time to dive into who are your advisors. I mean, you're asking about their lawyer, you're asking about insurance agents, CPAs, who do they already work with? Why do you do that? I mean, I know why, but I'm going to ask you to explain it to the audience why it's so important. Well,
it's obvious to me that not all of them are synchronized with what you want to accomplish. Now, a lawyer may say to do one thing, and an accountant may say to do something else. And so you have to get them all organized. So you have a team, but the missing ingredient is the macroeconomic leader of that team, and that's where I come in. I've had experience in many of these areas. I've never had an experience as a lawyer. I've experienced lawyers, but never had experience as a lawyer. And we got to be firm and sure that all of us are on the same page as you are.
Yeah,
and what you're trying to accomplish. So that's why we want to sit down with that. And we have a worksheet that we list all of them on. We put them in their file so they can get a hold of them at any time. Address, telephone number, and contact information, email if necessary. But I talk to them if the lawyer, I'll review an estate plan, and there might be something that the client didn't really understand or want that the lawyer included. So let's clean this up. I have a beautiful story to tell you. I have a client in Cincinnati, and the estate plan was kind of rough when I first inherited this client. And so I reviewed the estate plan. I said, we really need to clean this up. And part of the estate plan was a family home, and they wanted to leave it to a specific child rather than just leave it in the estate. And so I had made an appointment, took the client and the daughter, and we sat down with the attorney. And it's sad to say, but I really had to lead him through the process so that what the estate documents said was in tune with what the clients wanted. And once we got that done, the client's pretty happy about that now that it's working. So we want to go through the process. There's just a ton of stuff here, Eric. I don't know how much time we have left, but it's just really good. One of my favorite questions is, do you have any sports teams that you like? And the reason I say that is because I'm probably the longest suffering diehard fan of the Detroit Lions. And,
boy.
yeah, I know.
I'm sorry, Doug.
I know.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. It's the hope springs eternal. So every year is a new year. But so those are some of the stuff. And so we go through this discovery process. It's all about you. One of the things we'd like to know about is, what kind of world would you like to live in? What would your ideal world be? And sometimes that's very hard to have people describe that. And so that becomes the benchmark for what we want to shoot for. You got to have a target. You got to have some validation there, and say, okay, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Tax-free world. You want to live in a tax-free world. You want to have a beach house. You want to have a house in the mountains. It was another story. It was really cute. I lived in Florida for a long time, and everybody wanted to have a house in the mountains. So I moved to the mountains, and guess where they wanted to have an extra house?
Oh, at the beach.
At the beach, yeah.
At the beach, yeah.
So I had to kind of shift my mindset there. Yeah. But ultimately, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to provide direction, I'm trying to provide capability, and I'm trying to provide confidence. And we do that through creativity and our relationship and our leadership with each and every client. That's kind of like how we get started.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Kind of, you brought that story up. Beach, mountain, beach. The always kind of wanting something that you don't have. It's not greed necessarily, I don't think. You and I were talking before the podcast started. I just got back from Mexico and spent a lot of time in the water, and just that's where I feel my soul is tied to, and being in Nebraska at this point in my life, and surrounded by dirt and corn, it feels like it's kind of choking me off. But if we always look and say, the grass is greener on this other side, there's a lot of times we just need to look at our own lawn and say, okay, maybe I just need to put in a little bit more work, right?
Well, you know why the grass is greener on the other side of the fence?
The sun's different. I don't know.
No, that's where their septic tank is.
Oh, well, there you go. See, but I'm on sewer, Doug. So now what?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But yeah, sometimes we just need to put the work in on our own lawn, right? And so I think that will green up our lawn, and then the neighbors can look over and go, wow, that's where their septic tank is.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But the vision that we help develop in this ideal world is a cognitive approach. It crystallizes the ideal results you wish to occur in written form So in order for a strategy or a decision to be considered better, better must be defined. And that's what we're trying to do there.
Yeah.
It's just the standard on which previous strategies and future strategies will be judged.
Beautiful stuff.
It is. It is.
All right, Doug, if somebody wants to green up their lawn or maybe just move to a beach, how do they get a hold of you so they can start this conversation to kind of look at what they could possibly do and maybe start setting some goals?
Sure. Telephone numbers locally is 828-668-0665. And I think everybody's got long-distance free data.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So I leave it at that. My email is doug@theliberatedinvestor.com. Webpage, theliberatedinvestor.com. So,
and Doug, I know you've got a blog. I'm assuming that's on the website itself, correct?
Yep, that gets posted every week.
All right, fantastic.
So it'll be there.
Good deal. Doug, thank you so much for your time. It was a wonderful conversation today.
Yes, I agree too. And again, I really hope for this podcast is just for people to hear another story, a little different take on, the financial world, and maybe try to open some eyes and help them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for listening to the Liberated Investor Advantage podcast with Doug Alden. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Doug comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family, and I'm just going to ask you to do that now because these stories are going to match up with somebody that's going to be listening to it and say, hey, that could be me, or yeah, that's me in this situation, and I should really talk to somebody about that. And Doug's a great guy to talk to about it. So for everyone at the Liberated Investor Advantage, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Liberated Investor Advantage podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.